What's up, buddy?
Dude, it's so good to see you.
So good to see you too. I'm angry because
Yeah.
it has been was the last time we saw each other at the event at the Man Uncaged event.
Yeah, yeah, that's the last time. Isn't that crazy?
That's 3 years, bro.
That's a long time, man.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Somebody had to move across the country.
That was a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does impact. That does impact things, man.
Right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
not wrong. Are you sweaty? You promised you'd be sweaty.
Yeah, I threw on a little bit of an overshirt, but it was
Yeah.
it was good sparring rounds today because I with my reach and my length, I usually stay out and play that game, and I'm more of a counter fighter than anything else. And
Mhm.
with the fight coming up it's May 17th, um, I have to work the pocket a little bit more. So it was it was
So
stressful this
good.
morning. It was good.
Dude, so rad. So I was wondering if we could, and I know we're gonna go into all kinds of, and you haven't gotten to come on with a young man ever, which I'm excited that we've got some of our young guys in
Yeah,
here because I'm excited about so many aspects of that. But I was hoping we were gonna be able to talk about that.
we
You
can talk
texted
about it.
me last night, dude, and I was like, I saw that right before I went to sleep, and I'm like, dang it, because I've gotten back into boxing too, just to stay in
Have you?
shape. Yeah,
Sweet.
man. I mean, going out to American Top Team, is real close. Out here, Loudon's doing, kickboxing and
Yeah.
wrestling. So I can get out there at least a couple nights a week. And when you said that, and I know you've been training, but I was just dude, so fired up, man. So
So
what's
excited.
what's prompting the fight?
Okay, so there's a few different things. I would say one of the biggest things, and this is probably actually a good lesson for the young guys on the call to realize. So, you guys, I'm 40. I've got 7 kids, which I know feels like an insane number, and it is. And I have lived a life of, especially for the last like 12, 15 years, of very intentionally doing a lot of the stuff that Matt teaches you guys, doing hard things, challenging myself, all of this. And despite all of the personal growth, the business growth, and everything else, sometimes life still just throws curveballs at you that you're not expecting. And in the last 3 years, I've had a brother pass away. I've gone through a divorce. My business has really taken a big hit. And so, one of the big reasons for the fight is I want something to focus on that can feel like it's some forward momentum and something to kind of like get back on the horse in some way. And then another thing is I'm actually talking about this tomorrow because we're doing all of our like pre-fight interviews and everything else.
Okay.
And I'm of the opinion that more is caught than taught from a parenting perspective, right?
Mm.
And if I want my kids to be willing to challenge themselves and do hard things and get outside of their comfort zones, it doesn't matter how many times I tell them that if they don't see me do that same thing. So
Hey, man.
it's time to get in the ring. Even though I'm
Awesome.
40 and have no business being in there, it's going to be good.
I'm so proud of you. That's so rad. And so because you know her, I'm gonna say it. So saw that text last night. Literally got into bed and I told you, I'm like, dude, great, that's gonna make it hard for me to sleep. And I
Hmm.
get into bed and I'm like, whoa. And Heather's like, what is it? What's going on? I was like, dude, Tanner's got a fight coming up. She goes, what are you talking about? I said he's boxing, coming up in May. And she's like, that's awesome. Isn't he my age? Because she's 42. She remembers you guys are like this, you guys are the same
Yep.
age.
Yep.
I said, yep, he sure is. She's like, that's so rad. That's so cool, man.
I love it.
It's so good, man. I'm so proud of you, brother, for a billion different reasons, but that's huge. That more caught, than taught sort of mentality. We had at American Top Team out here, and the American Top Team is a great system, anyways. And shout out to Coach Steve Montgomery, who's a former UFC guy, who's the head coach over there, and just so many amazing guys, a lot of UFC guys that fight out of there. Um, there was a promotion kind of thing that happened a few weeks ago, right? And so I'm just keeping an old 45-year-old body in shape to the best of my ability, and I enjoy combat, and I always have, and I've got a
Yeah.
little experience in it, and so it's a great fit, man. And it was cool because Coach Steve was like, all right, look, for this next promotion level, we've got a thing we're doing where you're going to be invited to promote, but when you get invited, you've got to go, and we're doing 10 rounds. And by the way, those are 5-minute rounds
Whoa.
of sparring for the promotion to the next level, right? Like that's how he's addressing everybody. And I looked
Wow.
like I want to see if you like we're gonna get in there and beat you up, and you're gonna have a new partner every 5 minutes, and we'll have some
So
fresh
it's a
guys.
Shark Tank.
It's a
Man.
Shark Tank of just a beating, right? And
Woo-hoo-hoo.
so God bless the man. He comes up to me after class and he's like, "Hey, man." I know you've got experience. I know you've been in the ring. I know you're like 45. Like it's all, dude, it's all good. If you don't like, if you should be promoted to the next level. I said, don't you dare insult me like that.
Put me
Don't
in
you
there.
dare. Don't you dare. My one request, I will be there. My one request is I want to make sure I get around with you because you're the head coach. You're a UFC guy. You're a stud. I want to get around with you. I said, I want to get around with Loudon and I want my wife and kids to be able to be
Awesome.
there and watch the entire thing.
Awesome. That's so great.
That was that because I wanted them to see me. And I told them going in, I'm like, look, man, I'll give it hell for about 5 rounds, I think. And then watch the difference. Watch the difference in dad's gas.
Five 5 minute rounds is insane, let alone that only being half of it.
I figured that's about as far, and it was round five, man. And I was going, I got stuck with another pro at round five,
Oh,
which was great.
coach.
And I'm like, and I just felt it just go.
Yep.
I just took a
Just the dump.
beating. And so then the next 5 rounds was just like I was toast, man, but it's okay. I wanted them to see me. I wasn't gonna quit. You know,
Yes.
they
Yep.
had to see that, dude.
Yep.
You know, and I know you lead that way too. How are the kids, by the way, before we even get
They're
into it?
acclimating. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously it's hard to
yeah,
go from a loving, intact family to two
yes,
different houses and, have but I think the nice thing about it is I'm blessed enough that when they're here, I get to be fully present with them,
yeah,
so I'm not having to juggle work stuff or anything else like that. And so I just get to be a full-time dad when I do have them. And
good.
one of the big benefits of having gone through this experience is I've had to learn how to be an infinitely better father. And so
Yeah,
I'm more patient. I am more benevolent, but at the same time, I'm not. I haven't moved into being like indulgent or anything else like that. So
yeah.
it's been a good balance. So it's been good in that regard. Yeah.
Good for you, man. Good for you. I love that. And I mean, you got amazing kids too, and I know you are leading well all the time. So good,
Thanks.
man. I'm glad to hear that, and it doesn't surprise me, a bit. Um, you and I, obviously I'm honored to call you a friend. We've broken bread. We've gone on vacation. I had the joy of having you stay at my house.
Yeah.
And I credit a bazillion people for influencing my mind over the years, and that's what I want. I'm insatiably curious, right? But there are certain humans that do things and speak about things and help others with things that really tie into these universal principles that I think are rooted in our DNA, that I think, have been endowed upon us by a creator, is the way I look at it, right? And these are concepts that I go back to often, partially because these are areas that I still want to forever grow. You're one of those people who has very much helped my perspective on something that I think is so fundamental. And I credit you and our mutual friend Jack too for doing that in a similar way, but vastly different ways too, man. It's a really important thing to me. And so you've played a massive part in my own growth and journey.
Well, I really appreciate that. And that's high praise given that I know what your circle is like. And so to be
Sure.
included in there and have a special place in there is high praise. So thank you.
By far, man, and just a great human, man. So I'm excited for these young guys to get in, and I'm so
Yeah.
excited for your perspective on the wisdom that you have around the work that you do, and you're able to help so many men, and even if you don't work with them, you help them like me see things like, oh, he's not wrong on this. Okay, I've got work to do. I'm so interested on the young men's side, and if you see a shift in that, but would you do me the hugest most like let's pretend I haven't done 700 episodes of a podcast and we'll just go super will you tell these young guys a little bit of like a 30,000 foot overview of
Yeah.
quote unquote your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys. So I have one of the weirdest, but probably one of the most fun jobs in the world. And what I do is I teach men how to use their clothing and their appearance as a visual language and how to be as articulate with their appearance as they are with the things that they speak or the things that they write, and how to really become very fluent in that. And it's super fun because, irrespective of what your age is, the relationship between masculinity and aesthetics is one that is very, very powerful. And it's one that for the last few generations has been downplayed, which means it's a really big opportunity to learn how to speak that language and become more influential, more confident, more self aware, better in all the things that Matt's teaching you guys how to do. Your appearance can be a very powerful supplement to all of these good goals that you guys are working towards.
Guys, I can't understate enough. So gentlemen, the young men here, you guys have recommended readings, right? There's books that you are reading every month as you go through here. I will tell you, month one for our men in our men's program, Tanner's book is in there. Tanner's book is in there for our men, month one, the month that I continuously point men back to the most because it's Tanner's work and Todd Herman's work. The entire thing is the psychology of who you want to be. Who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I express that in every way? How do I express that in my thoughts? How do I express that in my language? How do I express that in the way that I appear into the world too? It is so important, man. It is so important. So, this is the meat, and I got a million questions here, and these guys will come in and ask way better questions than me. Do you see a difference fundamentally? I don't know if we've ever talked about this in this concept with men and young men. Do
Totally.
you feel okay? So what is this like? What is the fundamental difference when we've got some teens that are here with us that are stepping into? And when I say teens, these are the maturity that's here.
Right.
I know 15-year-old men, and a lot of them are on the call. I know 40-year-old boys, and they're not part of our program, right? So
Right.
we've got young men here, but what's some of the fundamental differences there, man?
So from my experience, both with coaching, with my own kids, with how I was as a teen, I would say that one of the things that's a lot different for you guys that are younger, and you're in a really good place with this, is you're at a fun stage where you're figuring out and establishing what your identity is. And that's what people expect of you is to not have things figured out, which means that you have a whole door open as far as what are the tribes you want to belong to? What are the core values that you want to embody? What are the ways that you want to represent that? And I know that things are a little bit different for you guys than it was when Matt and I were kids, where it's not like everybody gets together, but when Matt and I were kids, you had these very like specific cliques in schools.
Mhm.
And these different cliques would have very specific uniforms where even like when you get into these microcultures, like for me, I was really involved in extreme sports, like BMX is what I did, but the BMX guys would dress differently than the skaters who would dress differently than the rollerbladers. And to anybody on the outside, it seemed like we were all the same, but we were very aware of all these little micro differences as a way to kind of represent these different groups. And there was a lot of dressing to signal to other people, but even more so to reinforce our own identity. And I know you guys still do this today because it's part of that establishing that identity of I exist as part of this tribe or as part of this group. And the way that I embody that is I dress like it so that I can reinforce that from my self perception and I can signal that out to other people. Whereas guys who get a little bit older, a lot of times what they do is they get stuck in whatever it was that they were wearing 10, 15, 20 years ago. And
Mm.
they don't have that same latitude or that same freedom to be able to experiment and explore. And they also, we generationally, you guys get a lot less flack for this than we did, but we got teased a ton. Where if you showed any overt interest in your appearance, you were gay,
Yep.
you were effeminate, you were dishonorable, you were whatever pejorative that they could throw at us. You guys have a lot more kind of like social acceptance around caring about this stuff. But a lot of the guys that are your dad's age or even kind of like older uncles or even grandparents' age still hold on to this idea that real men don't care how they look. And the only thing that's appropriate is to dress with a level of apathy, and you guys get to invest a lot more intentionality into your appearance. So I would say those are probably the two biggest differences I see.
Really good, man. It's really good. And that concept of older gentlemen dressing with that level of apathy is that cultural acceptance that when you start having the conversation, there's so much to this that when you speak about this, it reminds me of me speaking about education, or anybody speaking about things where you can show a logical progression that almost everybody goes, yeah, that makes sense. But then you have this emotional tie to the way it's always been and you struggle to get out of that,
Yep.
right? Like it's that, man. And one of the things you just talked about right there that I think is so powerful is there is the signaling, and I think we get lost because we look at things this way. There's the signaling of, well, this is what I look like, this is what I'm addressed as, and here's how I'm signaling to other people. But it is so, one of the things you've taught me, it's so much more about reinforcing who I am, right? And it's not just one of the things you said to me one time is like, yeah, you want to be physically comfortable. That's great, but you want to be psychologically comfortable. And when you said that to me, I was like, holy dude, yes. Like you're that is a huge part. It's
Yep.
a huge part of being in shape in general to with that aesthetic, and it's a huge part of the clothing. And I know you're obviously speaking to being both, being
Hmm.
healthy and in shape, and the clothing. Which one's more important?
Definitely being in shape,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And I
yeah,
know that a lot of guys always kind of like choke when I say that because my job is something else.
yeah,
But the physicality of not only how it looks aesthetically, but just how you carry yourself, your sense of self-awareness, your confidence, your ability to recognize that I am capable of shaping some aspect of the world into what I want it to be. Like the power that comes from being in shape is infinitely more than what comes from clothing. Now, the clothing supplements it, and it's a huge supplement. But if you had to pick one or the other, the physicality is way more important than the clothing. 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can make bad clothing choices still look
Yep.
okay and still have that presence when you have that physical presence too.
Yep.
I was a little bit rhetorical because I knew that's what you believed and what you
Yeah.
were going to say. But
Yep.
I wanted them to hear you say it too. That concept of being stuck is also something um, that has really stuck with me. And I see that with guys who grew up with it, where it's like they're still wearing the baggy basketball shorts.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay. And I started to psychoanalyze some of that and go, I wonder if that is a time in their life where they felt most alive and most free. So they go
That's
back,
absolutely it.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's you
It's when
feel
you
like
peaked.
it's when you feel like that's when you peaked.
Yeah.
So you stay right there.
Yep.
I notice myself, and you and I have had some discussions around music before too, and we grew up on some similar music and have some similar tastes. We like a lot of different things, but we grew up on some similar things. Is music another one of those things like clothes where you kind of go back, or you can use it to go back to that feeling? Do you feel like you do that? I know that's not your space necessarily, but
Mhm.
is there some similarities?
Yeah, I think so because I think when it comes down to it, appearance and music are two very strong things that have emotion and identity infused
Mhm.
into them. And so there is this strong correlation because you guys, well, I think one of the things that I hope that you guys all really kind of take away from this, and this is, a hot take, but I firmly believe this. Men care about their clothing and their style more than women do. And I know that that's totally antithetical to what you believe. But the reality is that women, and we're painting in broad brushstrokes, whatever.
Sure.
But for the most part, women can change and adapt based on seasons, based on trends, based on who they're with or where they're going or anything else. And it's not that big of a deal because they don't feel this direct correlation between what I'm wearing and what my identity is. They can put on something without it feeling like they're being disingenuous or fake or wearing a costume or whatever else. But for men, we have this such a deep connection between feeling honest. Am I telling the truth with what I'm wearing versus
Mm,
what I'm not? And and so it becomes this idea. And Matt, I'm sure that you've experienced this. Some of the dads that are on the call have experienced this. I think there's even a deep biological level where if my kid's mom cuts her hair or changes the color of it a little bit, like they notice, but it doesn't become that big of a deal. If I
mm,
shave my beard off, my
mm.
kids don't even recognize me,
It's
right?
true.
And so there is, I think, even a biological level of kind of like how much we correlate identity and appearance with men versus what we do with women. And so it's a very emotional thing. It's a very identity driven thing. And I think music is a big part of that too, which is why it's so easy to get kind of trapped in both of those.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. That's so fascinating, man. I find myself, I make my kids, we have the tradition of every Saturday and Sunday, I'll make them these protein pancakes and these protein waffles. It's my recipe, but I also find myself every weekend when I make it, it's an 80, I put on like an 80s thing and it takes me
Mm-hmm.
back to like this own childhood sort of, I was living with more wonder at that point and I've had to
Yes.
train myself back into it, right? And so it's like I find myself doing that, and again, you made that correlation for me too with the clothing and how much our appearance and the aesthetics of it all plays with our psychology. Um, one of the things that these guys take on over the course of the 12 plus months that they're with us here is they're developing a leadership portfolio, right? They're developing evidence. We call it it's like a living, breathing resume. It's
Mm-hmm.
evidence of taking on these leadership challenges and doing all the things that we are doing here. They're
Yes.
documenting those things. Now, the world. tends to call this something that you and I agree on that we don't necessarily love, right? It's called a personal brand. And I and I don't love it either. And in fact, I was with Alex Hormozy a few weeks ago, and he's like, hey,
Oh, cool.
like on the personal brand side, here's what I want you to do. I'm like, God, I was like, I hate that. He's like, so do I. So what? The world calls it that. You're just saying, here's who I am.
We just
Here's
have to
what the
work
hell.
with it.
Here,
Yeah.
yep, just work with it.
We can resent it, but we have to work with it.
100%.
Yep.
So how much do you like have you seen you get to work with a lot of different clients from a lot of different fields, whether it's on social media or not, whether it's just these guys are running in these circles because they work in finance or they work, whatever their backgrounds are. Have you ever seen the change in aesthetics, the upgrade in aesthetics fail to help with somebody's personal brand or personal experience? Have you ever seen it where you're like, man, this actually didn't move the needle at all for this guy?
I have. Yeah, and the reason that that happens, I made this mistake a lot when I was first starting my business, and this is the mistake that happens a lot with guys who hire a stylist or get dressed by their wife or something else,
Mm,
is when the focus becomes either on just like the aesthetics, like how, do these colors work, or are these good patterns based on your build or things like that, or it's based more on trends and kind of what other people believe
mm,
looks good, as opposed to it being an external expression of an internal sense of self, right? Because
mm,
what happens is you're lying. You basically tell a false story and people pick up on that, and so then they start to doubt your credibility, you become disingenuous, and not only that, you feel like a liar, and so you start to feel self-conscious, you start to retract, and you're not as confident as things go. So you can absolutely dress better in the
mm.
wrong way if it doesn't actually align with who you are internally.
That makes a whole lot of sense, man. Makes a whole lot of sense. And you project all of those things when you feel like that. That is what you project. And people do pick up on that, if not consciously, they very much do subconsciously.
Yep.
When you're looking at those trends, and this is such a I love I love diving into this. And again, I don't necessarily want to just get stuck here because I just love you as a human too, and I want to talk humanity of it all too. But again, I learned so many things when I talk to you about this because your expertise is as deep as it is. When you're looking at the trends in this arena and these fashion trends going forward, for men, I inherently, as an entrepreneur, default to my own detriment sometimes to this like future thinking, and I can see where the puck is going, right? To use
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Gretzky's term, with education. I can see where the puck is going. I see very clearly that there will be a divide in this country. Government schools aren't going away, and I don't fully even think that's necessarily a bad thing as much as I don't love the system there. I do think there is a need there for them. And I also see this divide where you're going to have a lot that are home educating. You're going to have a lot that, what we're doing on these campuses, like that's going to continue to explode for a long time. So I play with those trends.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, are you able to forecast a little bit of trends in that way, or is that a harder thing to be able to do? Are you inherently looking at things more like a psychological game and looking at the now, or is there any like future projection there? That's a genuine. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say that that's one of the things that has kind of, for me, always been a little bit fun about this, because I've always been very aware of my style and stuff like that. And this is certainly going to age me for you young guys, but I remember in 2003, I would have been 19 years old, and I could see in like the alternative sports and the music scene and everything that I am, that everybody was starting to move towards really skinny jeans, because prior to that everybody was wearing baggy stuff, which is what you guys have gone back to. But prior to that everybody's wearing everything really baggy. And I remember having to go to a thrift store and buy girl pants because there was no way that, like, they weren't making this stuff for guys. So I'd literally go buy girl jeans at the thrift store. I remember getting teased about that for probably 2 years straight. And then all of a sudden, everybody's on board with it and everything kind of moves in that direction. And that's where things go. And the same thing happened to me probably 8 or so years ago, where I was wearing higher waisted, fuller cut stuff with pleats. And literally having people like big celebrities that would, quote tweet me on Twitter and say, look at this dude pulling off grandpa style, thinking he's some sort of an influencer or whatever else. And then things have gone in that direction. And so
Right.
there's always like some element of being able to pick up on that. But Matt, I think one of the hard things is that as we move more and more away from the West being a very homogenous kind of monoculture
Mm,
into being a bunch of different subcultures based on political ideologies or your hobbies
mm.
or sports or things like that, then these big macro pushes in trends start to disappear and you get smaller pushes based on what these little kind of small identities are. And that's where you see more trends kind of come and go.
That makes a whole lot of sense, man. Makes a whole lot of sense. Um, you're speaking of the cultural shifts and I think very much what you inherently do, but what you also naturally pick up on and pay a lot of attention to are these shifts. You have I think an artist's eye in a lot of ways because you see cultural trends outside of just fashion. You are
Mm-hmm.
able to see those kinds of things. You look at the world through those lenses, and you're able to articulate a lot of inherent truths through that art, through that art lens. What are you paying attention to and having fun studying right now? And I know obviously boxing is a this is a big part, and there's an art in and of itself right there,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are you paying attention to there now, and how do you connect everything that you are doing to that spiritual journey for you too? Because I know how important that
Yeah.
is, how much that's a huge part of your life too. So,
Okay.
what are kind of those hobbies now, and then how do you connect all of this to your spiritual pursuits?
That's a really fun question. Okay. So I would say one of the big kind of things that I'm seeing a focus on that I'm really excited about, and in a very big regard, like I envy you young guys because you guys are coming into an era where, irrespective of how you feel politically, with the things that have happened, we are moving away from a culture of fear and cancellation and a lot of this kind of like ideological rigidity into one where there's a lot of exuberance and a lot of excitement and a lot more willingness to take different risks. And you see it on certain online spaces where people are talking about things that would have been risky to talk about before, but that's going to start to move into people dressing in ways or engaging in hobbies or in different activities or things like that. Like we've gone from, you guys, the last 10 years, even from a style perspective, everybody was wearing stuff that was very like monochrome and it was trying to keep everything simple. And the whole ethos was really just like this almost kind of like millennial minimalism
Mhm.
of how can I resell my house? And so I have to keep my design very minimal, or how can I dress in a way that doesn't offend anybody or doesn't draw too much attention to myself? There was this very subconscious level of just keep your head down and grind and don't draw any attention to yourself or you're going to get in trouble with it.
Mhm.
And I'm feeling more and more that we're moving away from that culture into one where we embrace men being, especially young men, being active and being risk takers and having some of this bravado and some of this kind of energy and audacity of, I'm going to do things and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to try to shape the world in my image and what all of that looks like. And so you're going to see it in the way that you guys dress. You're going to see it in the hobbies that you participate in and the risks that are involved with that and all of these other things. And I do think that that's a spiritual thing. I very
Mhm.
much believe that God has wired men to be risk takers. And that doesn't mean that we always, that's not a justification for sin and for moral risk. But I think so often in different church cultures, it's too easy to squash out all risk taking as
Mhm.
a byproduct of trying to get men to be righteous men. And this is one of the things I love about our mutual friend Jack Donovan is how he talks about the difference between being a good man and being good at being a man.
Right.
And guys who are good at being men are comfortable with taking risks financially, socially, aesthetically, in all of these different ways. And you can be a good man that doesn't necessarily take those moral risks while still being comfortable taking all of those other risks. And so that's where I see all of this going. And it's so fun to see that energy move towards like, no, you can just do stuff. And that's where so many guys are doing things.
So good, man. So good. All right, gentlemen, I got a couple more questions that I want to, and I'm going to get you guys in here to keep the conversation going. Mikey T, that question, if you're able to ask that too, get your hand up. I want you to ask that out loud. If not, I'll ask it out loud for you if you're in a spot where you can't. But you guys can start putting your hands up. I'll start bringing you guys in here in just a second. Yet what you just said, so good, man. There's it reminded me of some things that I saw that you wrote recently too. And by the way, I hate that you've got to go into like social media stuff and specifically look somebody up because it was like you were disappeared for a long time. And I know you took a social media fast
Hmm.
for a while too. I know that was a thing, but I also hate that it doesn't freaking load stuff up
Right.
sometimes, so the people I actually care about. But you said something to the effect of like bad men will use their appearance to lie about who they are. Weak men will use it to hide who they are. But the whole point is like living this life worth projecting who you are, like
Yes.
reinforcing who you are, right? And I think the church does miss a lot of that. And then they'll also bring back in and kind of confuse the living with childlike faith and childlike expression. They'll confuse that with being childish.
Right.
It's not the
No,
same.
we're commanded to be childlike.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But that's not the same as childish.
Mm-mm.
And then we muddle all these things together without piecing them apart to think, what are we really trying to do and say on
Yep.
this? And I know you've seen that same sort of thing. Yeah, let's get
Totally.
some of these young guys in here. Mikey, I'm gonna wait on your question in case you're able to come on and ask it, but I will ask it on your behalf if you aren't. Let's get some of these young bucks in here. Trevor,
Do it.
there you are, sir.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you, sir, for taking time out of your day to join the call. Um, so I would like to ask, because normally, like as you said before, that like culture can obviously influence um like the younger generation into how they project themselves,
Hmm.
style, talk, whatever. Um, So I was wondering, who was one of your role models in style when you were young, and who do you think is
Ooh.
a good role model for the younger generation as of now?
Ooh.
Man, I love that question.
Hmm.
Okay, so I have two guys that were role models for me, and it's funny because they were in no way involved in anything in the style world whatsoever. So one of them was a guy named Mike Aitken, who was this kind of like BMX legend, and he was one of these guys where when you would go to contests, everybody, especially in like the late 90s to mid 2000s, everybody was just trying to get more technical. It's like how many bar spins or backflips or whatever else you could throw in. And what Aitken would do was the most like basic tricks that were invented 30 years ago, but he would just make them look so good. Oh, he just could make something as simple as like a tabletop where you just lay your bike out flat, but he could just make it just drip with style. And he was so fun to watch. And that translated over into his clothing style. And so a lot of my clothing influences came from him. And then the other one was the lead singer of this pop punk band called Midtown that didn't really have a big following or anything else like that. But I remember watching music videos, and the guy's name was Gabe Saporta, and the way that he dressed, 18-year-old me just thought he was the coolest looking guy in the world, and I just wanted to look like that. I wanted to look like that because I was in that scene. I thought it would get me girls, like everything else. I just wanted to embody that guy. And I would say that for you guys, that's probably one of the better things to do is pull inspiration from people that are in your hobbies or in your spaces and the guys who are at the kind of like top tier in that realm and do that rather than necessarily looking for guys that are in the style space because they're going to be doing stuff that's more about like this is funny and very hypocritical, but I'll say this like menswear and clothing, I don't think should be a hobby or an identity for you guys. There's a few of us that can go into it, but it becomes this very like almost pedantic space for
Mm.
a lot of people. And I want this to be on your radar, but I want you guys to focus on bigger and better things than just your clothes. And a lot of the guys who get really into menswear, that becomes like the end all be all. And it shouldn't be that way for you guys. So pull style inspiration from men that you're looking up to in other arenas keep an eye on what's going on in the men's space, but don't get neck deep in the menswear space like a lot of other guys do. Does that answer that for you, Trevor?
Really good.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the great question, dude.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's such a that not being the thing in and of itself. It is a phenomenal tool. It is a phenomenal tool to be used. That's the point.
Hmm.
Is that tool. I love it, man. Mr. Bryson, let's get you in here, sir. When you're driving, no crashing while you're in.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good on that one.
All right, man.
So, you talked about being authentic with who you are and what you're projecting it, and not to wear the false attire to present an image that is not you and not who your identity is.
Hmm.
Uh, we're currently doing a year two. We're talking about love languages and men, and we have a lot of young men on here. When you look into the dating scene and you look back at it, what's the one thing that you see as a trend that's coming out or is happening that projects a false image of a man in that
Mm,
scene and that atmosphere for our wives to pick up on, or that would create a better version, a better image of trust and the process of being able to provide in that aspect from them?
mm.
Okay, that's a really fun question, especially because like I'm back in the dating scene after
Right.
having been out of it for almost 2 decades, and it's kind of wild to be in there. So, okay, Matt, I'm gonna see if I can. Let's see if this will let me do this. Is it gonna let me draw stuff?
I will make sure. What I'll do is I'll make you not very
Hold
technologically
on, we're gonna do
brilliant.
this instead. Okay, hold on. Give me. Oh, that's why. Okay, guys, give me a sec because I wanna show you this because this can be pretty impactful. So give me just a second to get this figured out the right way. Okay.
No worries. And does it help if I make you a co-host or
Nope,
no?
you don't need to do anything.
Don't need to.
We
Okay.
just need to. Oh, that's why my iPad isn't plugged in. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
No, even that, whatever you've done, way fancier than anything I've ever done with these guys on a Zoom.
See, this is one of the things that's kind of funny because even when I present to like my guys and stuff,
Yeah.
my aesthetics have to be turned up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We can see this now, right?
Yes, sir.
Sweet. Okay, let me get back to where I can see you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so, David, what I want you to think about is an attention spectrum. Okay, so we've got these two opposite ends, and over here we have the guys who are wanting to hide. The whole ethos of how they dress is please don't pay attention to me. Don't
Mm,
notice me. Don't anything about this, like, because this goes back to what Matt and I were talking about early on is the psychological discomfort of anybody having any sort of expectations. So just please don't notice me. Don't do any of that. That's coming up backwards. So we're going to see how that plays there. Okay. And then on the other side, you have the guys who are like attention seekers. And these are the ones who are always dressing up in a way that is like the purple suits or the whatever else. And it's still rooted in this same level of insecurity, but rather than hiding by trying to disappear, they're hiding behind a persona. They're hiding behind this idea of I have to be, you know, this center of attention. I have to be the alpha male. I have to be the whatever, right? And there's this rooted insecurity that's in there as well. Ideally, where you want to be is not necessarily right in the middle. If you're a little bit more introverted, you can be, one or two standard deviations this way. If you're a little bit more extroverted, you can be one or two standard deviations the other way. But ideally, what you want to be able to do is dress in a way that communicates to other people and back to yourself that I am comfortable if you notice me. I'm comfortable with you having expectations and making judgments about me. But I'm also comfortable if you pay attention to other people and you completely ignore me and don't really care about me at all, because that's rooted in a very high level of confidence. And that's the type of thing that is ultimately going to be the most attractive from a dating perspective is, does this guy know who he is? Is he self-aware enough to know who he is? And is he comfortable enough to honestly project who he is to other people and hold that space and even that kind of tension of like drawing a certain amount of tension or not a certain amount of other? That's ultimately what can be visually very attractive from that dating perspective. Is that helpful?
Excellent. Yeah, that just helps me out greatly. I mean, I'm gonna get rid of my white New Balances and get a pair of actual shoes that actually look like they belong dressed up to going out with it. Appreciate
Yes. And Dave, one other thing that I would tell you is, and this is good advice for older guys, is that you want to, okay, Thomas Jefferson put it this way. He said, in matters of principle, stand firm like a rock. In matters of fashion, swim with the current. You
mm,
want to demonstrate some level of social awareness of like what are
mm.
these trends that are going on and what are the shifts that are happening, because it shows that you're still plugged in as opposed to just totally like stuck in an eddy and in dead water, right? And
Mm.
you don't have to be like the young guys where you're cutting edge and totally aggressive on the trends and making these big risks and all of that stuff. Like that is a young man's game, and you young guys should be playing that game. But for the older guys that are on the call, we want to be dressing in a way that is aware of that and kind of makes a nod to it rather than stagnant or hyper focused on it. So those are the
Mm.
big focuses that I'd put for you. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your time.
You're very welcome.
Good, man. And you talk about that social awareness too, and one of the things that I saw you say recently too, which I'm like, man, I think that's also spot on, is from a leadership perspective, going into an environment and intentionally not paying attention to how you present yourself within there, you can actually be doing a disservice to everybody else because you're lowering the quality of the environment. I think you use like a restaurant analogy where you're like, look, man, somebody went with a bunch of friends and he was dressed appropriately for the level of the restaurant they were at, right? It's the place that everybody goes when they've got a special
Engagements or
occasion.
graduations or all of that
Right,
stuff.
like a
Yes.
big deal. And you go in there in shorts and flip-flops, and what you are doing is you're not signifying, look, man, I don't even care. You're literally lowering the ethos of the environment for everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's kind of a, when you put it that way, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a prick thing to do, sort of,
It is.
like
Yeah.
really,
Because you're flexing. It's like, oh, this may be a big deal for you, but it's not a big deal for
not for
me.
me.
And it's selfish because it ruins the experience for everybody else that's in the space. Yeah.
Man, 100%. Yeah, really well put. Malachi, let's get you in here, sir.
All right, thank you, sir, for coming on. This is a really interesting conversation. I've never put a lot of thought into, dealing with how clothing reflects kind of the image you're trying to present and the values you hold. So, just kind of asking for your commentary here on current fashion trends, if you followed them at all, especially in the area of young men's clothes. Are there any specific clothing you see that you absolutely hate, some do you absolutely love, and kind of the messages that's underlying in the people who are wearing them? Why, like, what this means about them, the reason behind why they're wearing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Um, That's a good question because when it comes to the perspective of like trends from a young man's game and stuff like that, there are very few things that I actually hate because one of the things that I love about it, and I'm very much this way with my son, who's not where you guys are, he's only 10. And like, I don't love that his favorite thing to wear are like video game t-shirts, but he's learning how to express his identity with his style. And so I'm happy to let him have as much free reign as I can give him in that regard. Like, I still constrain him on what we wear to church or things like that, but I'm happy to give him that way. And so with a lot of the trends and especially a lot of the stuff that guys in your demographic are doing, I love seeing it and that you're pushing boundaries because it just means that you're open and exploratory and doing stuff like that. Now that said, what I don't love, and we're seeing less and less of this than we did, a few years ago, is the push towards androgyny. I do think that you can be experimental with your style, but you should be doing it in a way that still very much leans into and embraces and expresses unapologetic masculinity, as opposed to going into any sort of androgyny. Like, be young men and be proud of the men aspect of being young men and play into that, as opposed to trying to blend that.
Hmm.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I agree
Yeah,
with that too. I've seen
good.
some guys I know kind of in that stance, like, oh man, that's terrible,
Right.
and it just doesn't reflect very well on him.
Well, and one other thing that's worth paying attention to, you guys, is that there's always room for personal taste because there's certain things that I'm probably a little bit different than most people because I can genuinely appreciate a lot of styles even though I know I can't pull stuff off. Like, I'm not great with streetwear, or I'm certainly not going to pull off, I'm not the guy that's wearing the like vintage 40s three-piece suit and trying to bring back Cary Grant style or something else like that. And so a lot of times it's worth it to recognize that just because a particular style may not be your taste doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just not your particular flavor. And I think that's an easier translation with music, where it's like, I don't love the
Hmm.
Beatles. I kind of hate the Beatles. I can recognize the impact that they had on culture and like the talent that was there and like the needles that they moved and stuff like that without liking them. And I think that that's the same attitude to take with stylists. You may hate country or hip hop or EDM or whatever else, but still recognize that there's talent in each of these genres, and it's the same thing
Mm.
clothing wise.
Well said.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
well said. And again, I always appreciate the unapologetic look. There are still vast differences between men and
Dress
women.
like a man.
Period. End of freaking story.
Yep.
There's no compromise on that. And I appreciate that. And I also have a newfound love of the fact that you and I don't like the Beatles. I do not like, but I'm very much with this. My father-in-law's favorite band. And I'm like, dude, look, I get it. I get the impact. I love it. I'm glad that they've done what they've done. And they're phenomenal musicians. I hate their songs.
Yeah,
Period.
would never mind if I did never hear them again.
100%. Dom.
Thank you, sir, for coming on the call today. So when you were answering Trevor's question about how like main of a focus style should be in the way you dress, I wonder if your opinion of that carries over to like working out we were talking about earlier, where should it just be something that's kind of important but not a main focus? How much of your time should it take up versus how much is making it sort of too big of a deal in your
Yeah.
eyes?
Okay, thank you. Fantastic question. Man, I forgot how good your guys are. You guys are
Right?
just you're articulate, you ask
best.
intelligent questions, you're polite. Man, you guys are awesome. Okay. The best men in the world, not only as far as the value that they offer to other people, the leadership capacity and all this other stuff, but the ones that are the most fulfilled are multidimensional. And one of the worst things that we have experienced in the last 50 years has been a big media push to try to convince us that you can either be a dumb jock or a weak nerd, and that those are two mutually exclusive, totally separate realms, and you can't integrate and be all of it. We should be Plato. We should be wrestler philosophers, right? And so you should absolutely be focusing on the gym, and you should be focusing on philosophy. You should be socially competent just as much as you're physically competent and all of that. And the beauty of it is that, and Matt can attest to this, this has been my experience, is that rather than than them actually being mutually exclusive, they become very synergistic, where as you get better with your workout protocols and what you're doing from a diet and a sleep perspective, you find that your ability to see things and understand that translates into better social skills. And then when you get better at that, that translates into better understanding of hierarchies and how to be respectful with authority figures and all this other stuff. So like take the things that you're excelling at in some arenas, have the balls to take risks in other arenas that are scary for you, and then apply those same principles in those arenas and watch how easy it gets to become multidimensional. And so, Dom, I would say the answer is don't pull back on the things that you're doing, but go forward in on more things, if that distinction makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Great question, Dom. Mr. Wells.
Liked the way you talked about representing things. I did not mean to do this, but I just so happened it. Oh crap! Nope, I'm not wearing the shirt I thought I was wearing. Never mind then.
No worries.
I thought I was wearing a church shirt. It's the same green. Um, I have noticed recently, and this could be, forever and ever, but I have seen recently that shoes are a big part of style. And so that's the first question. I have another one, but I just want to hear your answer on how do you feel about, shoes and stuff like that.
Yeah, shoes are big, especially because shoes are one of those things that can become very identity specific. If you're wearing work boots, that's very similar in function to cowboy boots, but the identities are worlds apart, right? Or if you're wearing a pair of Jordan 1s, that's going to communicate something very different than wearing Adidas NMDs or something else. And so shoes can become okay, if we think about clothing as a visual language and you think about English being a language where, okay, so I learned to speak Spanish. I served a mission for my church and I learned to speak Spanish as part of that. And Spanish is not a super specific language, where in English, you take the word like laugh and you have giggle and chuckle and chortle and guffaw and all these other like little articulate words that can express the nuances between these different types of laughs, where in many other languages, they don't get that nuanced with it. Clothing and especially shoes is kind of like that level of nuance where there is a difference between a giggle and a chortle. And if you don't speak the language, you'll just be like sneakers or sneakers or sneakers. But if you do speak the language, you can understand the ocean of difference between those two different styles.
Well put.
Yes, sir. And I cannot believe, but you so happen to lead very well into my next question of I do love the style of basketball clothing.
Hmm.
That's what I mean, I love basketball, and so I almost felt obligated to buy a pair of Jordans one time. And of course, I am not paying the normal price, so I bought it from a Uptown Cheeksteak.
Yeah.
But I still love them and wear them a good bit. And I also do find love in country clothing.
Hmm.
And so where do I separate the two? As I am not very country, but I live in Georgia. And
Gotcha.
so it's like that's like I have a lot of friends that are like that, and I love that style. It's just, is it lying to wear that kind of style, and how should I like
Gotcha.
differentiate the two?
Such a good
Yes.
question.
Okay, that is a great question. Okay, so I want to introduce you guys to something that I normally only teach to my coaching clients, but I think it will be helpful for you guys. Let me see if I can find this in here. Um, it's the idea of sartorial synonyms. Okay, so sartorial is just like a fancy word for clothing, and the concept of these synonyms basically translates into I want you to put clothes into four different quadrants. Okay, the easy ones are I like it and I can pull it off, which means we just wear it, or I don't like it and I can't pull it off, which means I just don't wear it and I skip it. Okay. The other two that get a little bit more complicated is I like it, but I can't pull it off, or I don't like it, but I could pull it off. And then we have to start to think about what are the tweaks that we can make into something in order to be able to pull it off. Okay. Now, the way that we start to think about what those tweaks are is, as you guys know, because you're intelligent, synonyms are two words that mean basically identically or roughly the same thing, right? Okay, so I'm going to show you guys something here. Hold on. Let's see. Okay. I love everything about George Washington, including his style. I can't wear this. I cannot pull this off. This would be the most ridiculous costume if I were to go to a date or walking out on a fight or anything else like this wearing this. It's ridiculous, right? So, what's a synonym for this? The first thing that I need to figure out is what does this mean? Why do I love this? To me, I love this because it represents dignity and credibility and self respect and authority and all of these other things. And so I don't love the clothing purely because of the clothing. I love it because of what it represents. And then my question becomes, as a single father of seven living in Salt Lake City, Utah, who runs his own clothing business and is in the fight world, what are things that I can do with my style, pulling from my tribes and my different influences that will signal credibility, authority, self respect, mastery, those types of things? So, Beckett, that's the same thing that I would encourage you to do is spend some time, write it down even. This is not like an easy exercise, but really spend some time thinking about it is what is it that you love about that country style? What does it represent and embody to you? And then how can you recreate that same meaning in something that is going to be easier for you to pull off given where you live, who you interact with, what your hobbies are, all of that type of stuff.
Well,
Make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. That is
You're
very
very
helpful.
welcome.
it's really good. I want to riff on that for a second too. So like, how do you, because you are, you have a lot of very high end clients, and obviously I don't know your entire client base, but I know that's a fact. I know you show up as this ridiculously present dad. You are going out, you are on the dating scene. Hey, but you're also legitimately a fighter. You train and you are competing. There's different stuff. There's the psychological representation, and there are certain guys that can embody all of this. There are the different style differences. Do you find yourself? I think this is a fascinating question, Beckett. I'm so glad you asked that too. Do you find yourself going, okay, right now, because this is Dad Tanner,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna wear this. When I go in there as fighter Tanner, though, it's a different style. It's a different embodiment of these different ideals that I still identify with. But hey, Dad Tanner is going to go on the shelf for a second because I've got warrior archetype Tanner that's coming in right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
are you able to separate those things pretty well because of practice? Or is there more blending and you've got to like go, oh, I got to psychologically wrestle with this? Like, how do you look at that?
It depends on the day and on the goal because there are times when okay, clothing is kind of like a threshold where you can treat clothing. Okay, you guys get this from a workout perspective that you put on your pump music and you have your kind of like warm-up routine and everything because it gets you in a particular headspace and it makes you be fully present and it turns you on.
Mhm.
The same thing with like the fact that I have a workspace in my home that's different than my bedroom, so that when I'm in my bedroom, I'm relaxed and I'm sleeping and I'm doing that. Whereas when I'm in my office, I'm engaged and I'm creative and I'm doing all of this. So like we can do different things that trigger different mindsets in us. Your
Mhm.
clothing is a huge trigger for that. Any of us who have ever played a sport, you know how different you feel when you put on your uniform for a game versus what you're wearing when you're training and you're at practice. You go into a different mindset, you become more
Mm.
present. And so there's certainly times when you can use your clothing as a tool to be able to get you much more present and injected in whatever it is that you're doing. This is one of
Mm.
the big reasons I argue for like dressing the best you can for church or for a job interview or for a date or whatever else. But there are also times that you feel like you want to feel like this, again, I'll use this term, but this multidimensional, fully embodied, like I'm not just dad Tanner or just fighter Tanner or just coach Tanner, but I'm all of these things. And so there are times when I integrate different elements of my style in order to bring all of that in together. And so always think of your clothing as a tool to accomplish the job, and you have to know what the job is first before you can adapt the clothing to fit whatever the job
So
is.
good. So good, man. As you're sitting there talking about this, I'm going back to there's a movie from the 80s called Commando. I just showed Loudon this movie not too long ago, right? But you got Arnold Schwarzenegger in there, and you got he's the mountain man. He's the mountain man dad in the beginning. I can still picture him with his like, he's carrying this big old log, and later he's got this just like green, almost like I don't know. He just looks like the mountain man, but also the dad, and he looks very competent. But then later on, when he's got to go kill somebody, there's the montage of just like,
Yep.
the band's going on, and I'm strapping up because it's
Putting on the warrior.
putting on the warrior,
Hmm.
right? I mean, physically, metaphorically, like that. Yeah, it's that. Freaking love this. Dave, go ahead, sir.
Tanner Guzy, huge fan. Awesome to just be on a call with you, man.
Thanks,
Uh,
man.
Truly a pleasure. And for the youngsters here, I second what you said. It's so well spoken. I'm always impressed. I love the treat, Matt, that you've allowed the grown men to
Thanks.
join. Um, just a couple reflections, and then I got a question for you, Tanner. But
Cool.
at my age, I'm 44, and I think for the last 30 or in my 30s, probably a touch in my 20s, definitely now in my 40s, for when I got the money to dress exactly how I want. So that's fun. And I'm
Yeah.
actually having a lot of fun with it. I find myself in multiple worlds. Sometimes I work from home. So sometimes I'm a hoodie, right? Just grinding. I live really close to the mountains. I'm in Golden, Colorado. Sometimes I'm throwing
Awesome.
on a flannel and a sharp, coat and I'm, go and adventure, but I still kind of I look how I want to look. And then
Yes.
I find myself in the corporate world. So I throw on a suit and tie or a jacket, slacks, whatever, but I'm a country boy, gentlemen. So I've got this belt buckle. It's not a cowboy belt buckle,
Hmm.
but it's a belt buckle that represents who I am, right? And it actually has e pluribus unum on it,
Oh, nice.
kind of covert. So it's just a reminder of me as I'm walking through the airport, whatever, in front of a bunch of clients. Like I feel good. I've got a couple little signals. Maybe people don't even notice that, right? But it feels
Right. It's
it
not about
feels
what
like
they notice, it's about how you feel.
exactly, precisely. And it's me telling a story because we're all storytellers and we're all story receivers, by the way. So this is kind of my riff that I want to hear from you, Tanner, for the youngsters. Like I catch myself seeing a random stranger in a airport and being like, "Good sir, you look so sharp today. Nice work." A guy I met the other day at this conference, I'm like, I just got to tell you, like, are you allowed to dress that sharp at this conference? Like that, you look amazing, you know? So I just wonder what you think, Tanner, about the youngsters here admiring each other, giving each other nods as a way to reinforce this notion of dress the way you want to convey,
Mm.
express your
Yes.
story, right?
Yes. And I will add to that, it is the easiest thing. Nobody ever hates being complimented on their style,
Mhm.
men or women. Everybody loves hearing it. And it's a really good way to work on your social skills because you're cold approaching. You're just coming up and say, dude, those shoes are killer, you
Exactly.
know? And if
Go
that's
for
all
it.
you say and he just says thanks and then you just fist bump and you move on, or it's an
Yes,
opportunity
yes,
to open and say, tell me where you got them or whatever else. Like you can take
exactly.
the interaction as short or as long as you want it. But to get over some of that social anxiety, it is the easiest thing to do to compliment people. And from a dating perspective, girls get told they're beautiful all the time. It
Mhm.
gets boring, it gets trite, But if you notice something specific about them, about their clothing, and compliment them on that, then you're not just, hey, congratulations, you have a nice face. But
Mhm.
it's, oh, he still appreciates beauty, but he appreciates the intentionality or the effort or whatever else that's gone into it. It is so easy. Oh, approaches are so easy if you can comment and ask an intelligent question about something that a woman is wearing. And so, absolutely, totally sign off on that idea. Compliment people on their appearance, men or women, like make that a normal thing for you and give people, I'm sure you guys have seen the meme of like, women get 1,000 compliments a day, and men remember the one compliment that the grandma behind them in the grocery store gave them
Totally.
30 years ago,
Yeah.
right? Give other dudes compliments all the time because we need that and we hold on to those and like help guys stack those wins by getting that too.
Freaking
Totally,
awesome.
totally on board, Dave.
Right on.
That's freaking awesome, man. Well done. That's funny too. You mentioned in the shoes. We had our reunion, Apogee reunion this last December, and a few hundred people out there in Texas and getting together, and we had the main event and got to see some folks that were there. And one of the men from class one, the very first men's class, and you got to speak to those guys. There was another guy who was a more recent guy who's like, "Oh man, you look sharp! Like, and I really really like your shoes." And this guy says, "Yeah, man, I've really been taking care of my shoes. Actually, it started when when we met Tanner, when Tanner first came on or whatever, and it's changed his entire." So it's
That's
funny, man.
awesome.
That compliment was about that, and he credited you
I love
with
that.
that,
Oh,
which
that
is
makes me feel good.
pretty freaking rad. This is just this last December, man. So
That's rad.
yeah,
I
pretty
love it.
freaking cool. I know where to now. Are you okay with a couple more, man? I want to make
Yeah,
sure
we can do two more, and then I gotta I gotta shower to get to a haircut.
oh,
So yeah,
100%, man. I
you
know you
guys
got
literally caught me like as I pulled up from sparring, which I
you're the
love.
freaking best, man.
I'm slumming it a little bit today, but I'm glad to hang out with you guys.
Oh man, thank you so much, guys. We'll make these quick. Beckett, go for it.
Sorry to jump in again, but I was wondering how you talked about showing up differently with different clothes. Have you ever helped someone almost create an alter ego, if you know what that is, with their different clothing?
It's a good question because I have, and it doesn't ever stick. I don't like to do it. And so I think one of the best ways for you guys to think about this is kind of like the concept of progressive overload with strength training. Okay. So, like, if my one rep max on bench is 225 and I want to get to the point where I can do 315, I'm not loading up 315 on the bar tomorrow and the next day and the next day and trying to push until I can eventually get it. Like, it doesn't work like that. I'm going to get 6 reps instead of 5 at 225, or I'm going to go up to 227 and a half or 230 or whatever else. And so the reason that I'm making this correlation is that we don't always have to have perfect alignment between how we present ourselves externally and how we see ourselves internally. But if there's too much disparity between those two, then what happens is we bring back down the way that we dress to be authentic and reflect who we are. So if we create too strong of an alter ego, if that disparity is too strong, we'll abandon it because we value honesty more than almost anything
Mm,
else, right?
mm.
But if we create a little bit of disparity where the way that I'm dressing is a little bit aspirational, it's a little bit better than what I currently am, then it can become this very cool psychological game of, okay, can I start to act and show up in a way that brings me up to that guy? And then when I'm there, can I push that a little bit more and continue to rise and rise and rise? So we want to work in like little incremental disparities as opposed to big ones. And so it should never feel like it's an entirely alternate persona so much as it is a better, more actualized version of what the ideal man or the ideal me looks like.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
Small steps at a time. Just
Yep.
level up. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, you got the last one, Dave. Let's get you in here.
All right. Hey, Mr. Tanner, I appreciate your knowledge. I've grown to more respectful of it over this last hour for sure.
Thank you.
Initial skeptic, but I took your quiz, rugged. Some
Not surprised
poetry
even by
from,
what I'm seeing.
yes. My nose is broken from jujitsu, so I respect the combat sports as well for sure. Question on what you may see as cheating in your perspective. So, some poetry from your website about Justified. Crowder used rugged elements in his wardrobe to keep in touch with the men he was leading, but introduced refined articles to set him apart as a leader and give him the opportunity to rub shoulders with others who weren't on the bottom rungs of the social ladder. Huge fan of the show. Would love
Great
another
show,
excuse
right?
to watch it. Great show. Would it be cheating for me or anybody else who identifies a Hollywood character as their archetype to watch and copy and say,
No,
that's rugged. Okay.
no, no. And the only thing that I would say that you don't want to do is if you live, like if you're in that close of alignment with him that copying works, then do it. But other than that, I would say you're better off to kind of like steal like an artist or riff off of it. Maybe a good comparison is you don't want to be a Boyd Crowder cover band, but you want to play in the same genre that he does.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well
you're
put.
welcome. But guys, absolutely. Oh, I pull so much inspiration from the different stuff that I see on TV shows or in films or things like that. Like by all means, use those as good cues and good places to get ideas from, especially because I mean they pay those costume designers millions of dollars to psychologically make you feel things based on what those characters are wearing. There's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into that, so use it to your advantage. Absolutely pull from those sources. Yeah.
Ah, brilliant. Gosh dang it, dude. You're the freaking best. For a million different reasons that I've outlined a lot of those already, man. Where do I want to put this out as a podcast, assuming you're okay with that, since we've done
Yeah.
this a couple times. So I want to make sure that the audience too, remind them where to go. And then what do we do to just continue to support you? I'll shoot you something offline after I take these guys, through a debrief anyways. But
Great. Yeah. Okay. So easiest place to find me is on Twitter or Instagram. It's at Tanner Guzy, TANNERGUZY. Give me a follow on there. The main site is masculine-style.com. David alluded to there's an archetype quiz, and Matt will give you a better breakdown as far as like what the 3 archetypes are and stuff like that. But it's a really good way to start to get introduced into more of the psychological aspect of it. And give you an idea of kind of how to start to play things there. And that'll also get you on my mailing list. You can check out my book, The Appearance of Power, either on Amazon or on Audible. It's a very kind of like we've talked about, a little bit more of an appearance psychology as opposed to, here's how to tie a tie or how long your pants should be, or that type of stuff. And so those are the best ways to do it. And then for you guys that are actually on the call, I just dropped my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out with any other questions. For you guys that are in the men's group, if you're interested in working with me at a different level, feel free to reach out and let me know. For you young guys, I only do this for the guys that are in Matt's group, but if you guys have questions about stuff that you want more direct involvement with, I'm happy to offer more direct mentorship on a certain level for you young guys, because I want to, a rising tide lifts all ships, and I want to help you guys out. So do not hesitate to email me at that email address that I popped in there for you guys.
you're the freaking best, man. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I'm gonna bring these guys through an entire debrief on this. I'll shoot you a text here in a little bit. I want to, again, I want to get something on the books too, where we can just also just connect on the man-to-man level too.
Yeah.
And I want to talk all things life with you, man. And I'm just
Let's do it.
I'm proud of you. I'm grateful for you. And again, I love you so freaking much, man. Give my kids the best too. I'll reach out here in a little bit and we'll schedule that.
Love you, brother. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. I'm always so impressed by you guys. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll go from there.
Can't wait, man.